Please welcome the president of Summit Ministries, Dr. Jeff Myers.
Good morning. At the heart of the battle for religious freedom are deeply committed leftists who demand that America make an exception to its constitutional tradition of freedom so that they can openly bully people who have deeply held religious convictions. And unfortunately, this agenda is winning with the rising generation. Less than half of millennials and Gen Z are with us on the issue of religious freedom, and the numbers are falling fast. That's where our organization, Summit Ministries, comes into play. Summit is the organization that prepares young adults to stand for truth in the gale force winds of deceit in which they find themselves, especially on their college campuses. And in our 2-week programs, we bring together young adults and Christian thought leaders for intensive discussions on all of the big issues of our day. In the process of that, we teach them a two-part strategy for defeating bad ideas. And I wanted to take just a few minutes and describe that strategy to you, because I know as you hear a lot of this information, you may be asking, all right, this is great, I'm glad these people are doing good things, but what can I personally do? Here's how we describe it to our students. The first is you have to reject the left's framing of the issues. Hold your hands up just like this for a moment. Imagine that you are a director of a movie and you're framing out your shot. Now, why would you do that? Because the camera can't see everything that you see. The camera can only see this much. So as a director, you make sure you understand what the viewer can see, and then you put into that frame everything you want the viewer to see. They won't see anything besides what you put in that frame. And so the person doing this in the political realm is always going to do it based on his worldview. For example, if someone has a worldview that God does not exist and that religious people shouldn't have an influence in government because they believe in a fantasy, it's like having an invisible friend and it's a little crazy. If they believe that and they allow that frame to take place, then everything that happens in the discussions about God happens inside that frame. So for instance, a lady came to me at a conference and she asked me, do you believe that God exists? I said, I do. She said, do you believe that God is everywhere present? I said, yeah, I do. I remember learning that in my catechism. And she glared at me and said, I would never teach my child that. And I asked, why not? She said, because it's creepy. And I remembered the frame. Oh, I can see why she says it's creepy. Because to her, God doesn't really exist. You would only tell your child that God exists in the same way that you would tell your child about the tooth fairy or about the Easter bunny or about Santa Claus. And let's be honest, Santa Claus is creepy. You know the song. He sees you when you're sleeping. He knows when you're awake. He knows if you've been bad or good. So be good, for goodness sake. You know the words, right? Oh, you better watch out. You better not cry. You better not pout. I'm telling you why. Santa Claus is coming to town. Creepy, right? So then you start talking about God to somebody who believes that God is like Santa Claus and creepy, and you're like, well, God is just a stalker, just like Santa Claus is a stalker. Unless you reject the framing, you can never make progress on the discussion. The same thing is true in the religious freedom battles of our day. The current framing that the left provides on this is that the whole issue is about whether conservatives and Christians have the right to deny service to people they don't agree with. As long as that is the framing of the issue, we will always lose. Because even if we win, we come across as no better than segregationists who are selfish and greedy. You have to start by rejecting the frame. Does that make sense? You just say, I reject the way you're framing that issue. And then second, you reframe the issue from the standpoint of truth. Religious freedom is not about denying service. It's not even about the freedom to gather with other people to worship. It is about the right to live out our deepest convictions in a way that brings our faith to bear on civilization that has a tremendous influence and is a blessing to the nations of the earth. That, at the heart of it, is what the issue is about. So at Summit Ministries, we tell our students stories. For example, we tell them about Columbanus, who was an Irish monk. He read in the Bible that Jesus wanted him to go to the nations of the earth, and he had never been anywhere, so he didn't know how to do that. He and his brothers built a boat made out of animal skins. Where should we go? He said, I don't know. God will direct me. And so they just pushed him out, no oars, no sail, no nothing, and he just floated away into the ocean. And he landed in Great Britain, started a monastery, which then turned into a library, which then turned into a university. Then he went on to France and did the same thing, and on to Switzerland and Italy. I believe that he started 13 different monasteries, all of which became universities, all of which took the gospel message and applied it to culture and brought about tremendous light in Europe in a very dark time. It's hard to admit that allowing Christians to do something crazy could actually be good, but Columbanus floated away in an animal skin boat and changed the whole face of Europe. So today, what is it that we can focus on? As a Christian, I look back and realize it was Christians who were at the heart of the abolition of slavery. It was Christians who were the first ones to establish the rights of women and children and to form education and modern science and charity. Today, according to a professor at Georgetown University, the efforts of Christians applying their faith to society has an economic impact of $4.8 trillion per year on the economy. That is 1/3 of the United States economy that comes about from allowing people to have religious freedom. At 11 o'clock, I'm going to do a workshop that expands on some of these themes. It's called The Secret Battle of Ideas. And in the workshop, I'm going to talk about how to understand the worldviews that are really at play in our own culture today, how to reframe the issues so that we can be excited about what religious freedom can bring, the tremendous benefits to civilization that it can bring. And then I'll share 10 things that we have learned at Summit Ministries that are guaranteed to reach the hearts and minds of millennials and Gen Z, and actually how you can phrase them and why they work. So that when you're talking about big issues like we're talking about this weekend with your children, with your grandchildren, with your students, with your young employees, you will be able to persuade them as well, and we can pass that baton of godly faithfulness on to the next generation. Make sense? All right, thank you so much for your time. God bless you.